I remember the exact temperature of the coffee in my hand when I read the email. It was lukewarm. Which means I'd been standing there longer than I thought. Long enough for the coffee to go cold. Long enough for my entire understanding of the last 14 months to quietly collapse like a building that had been hollowed out from the inside, floor by floor, while I was busy going to work every morning and kissing my wife goodbye at the door. The laptop was a silver MacBook Pro. Hers. It was sitting open on the kitchen counter at a slight angle, the way you leave something when you're planning to come right back. She'd gone upstairs to shower before work. I sat down to check the radar because there was a front moving in from the northwest and I had 3 outdoor jobs scheduled that day. I do electrical work. Residential, mostly panel upgrades, outlet installs, the occasional rewire on an older house. You learn to check the weather the way some people check their horoscope. Religiously and with low expectations. The browser was open to Gmail. I wasn't going to look. I want to be clear about that. I sat down, moved the trackpad to open a new tab, and the screen shifted just enough that I caught a name in the subject line. His name. I knew that name. I'd heard it maybe a dozen times over the past year. He was a colleague of hers. She worked in pharmaceutical sales. He was in her regional office. She'd mentioned him the way you mention furniture, casually, without weight, just part of the background of her day. I clicked the thread. There were 214 emails. The oldest one was dated 14 months ago. The most recent one was from 2 days before 11:47 p.m., after she'd told me she was going to sleep early because she had a headache. I didn't read all 214. I read enough. I read the one where she described our marriage as going through the motions. I read the one where she told him she loved him for the first time. And I read the one about 6 months in where she wrote his name and then my name in the same sentence, and the sentence ended with the words, "He has no idea." I closed the laptop exactly the way I found it. I finished my coffee standing at the sink, looking out at the backyard. The oak tree we'd planted when our daughter Emma was born. The tire swing that our son Tyler had outgrown but neither of us had taken down yet. The garden beds my wife had put in last spring and been so proud of. I put my mug in the dishwasher. I picked up my work bag. I heard the shower shut off upstairs. I drove to my first job. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Dan. Daniel Kowalski. I'm 47 years old. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, moved to Columbus for a girl, not this one, a different one, a whole other story, and ended up staying because Ohio had a way of keeping people who weren't paying close enough attention. I've been an electrician for 22 years. I run my own small operation now, Kowalski Electric, just me and 2 guys, Rick and a younger kid named Marcus who I'm training up. We do good work. We're not the cheapest, but we show up when we say we will and we don't cut corners on wire gauge. In this business, that's enough to keep the phone ringing. I married Lauren in 2009. She was 31, I was 34. We met at a friend's cookout. She was visiting from Cincinnati. I was there because I'd wired the homeowner's garage and he'd invited me to stay. She laughed at something I said that wasn't that funny and I decided she was the one right there, standing in someone's backyard with a plastic cup of white wine. We have 2 kids. Emma is 13 now. Tyler just turned 10. Good kids. Emma's into volleyball and has opinions about everything. Tyler is quieter, more like me, spends most of his time building things in the garage, Lego, then model kits, now actual woodworking with supervision. Lauren works for a pharmaceutical company, Meridian Health Solutions. She sells medications to doctors' offices and hospital networks. It's a good job, good money, lots of flexibility. She sets her own schedule most days. I always thought that was a perk. I understand now, it's a different kind of thing. We had a solid marriage. Not a passionate one, maybe that passion had cooled down after 15 years the way it does, but solid. Dinner together most nights. Vacations to the Outer Banks every summer. Arguments about the usual things, money, schedules, whose turn it was to deal with the school forms. Normal. That's what I would have told you if you asked. The first thing that felt not normal happened about 16 months ago. She started going to the gym. That sounds ridiculous as a red flag. People go to the gym. But Lauren had never gone to the gym. Lauren was a walker, she'd do 4 miles around the neighborhood in the mornings, and that was her thing, had been for years. Suddenly she joined a gym on Henderson Road and was going 3 evenings a week. I didn't think anything of it. I should have paid closer attention to when exactly she'd come home. Here's the thing about suspicion. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with an alarm. It seeps in through the cracks and things that don't quite add up, accumulating slowly, like water behind a wall that you don't see until the drywall starts to bubble. The gym was the first crack. The second one happened about 2 months later. I came home early from a job, the homeowner had to reschedule, something with a delivery, and Lauren's car was in the driveway at 2 in the afternoon when she was supposed to be doing sales calls. I walked in, she was on the phone in the kitchen, and when she saw me she turned slightly, just slightly, away. Like a reflex. She got off the phone fast. Said it was her manager. I said okay. But I noticed the color in her neck. Just above the collar. When Lauren was flushed from conversation, from anything that mattered to her emotionally, she got this flush that started at the collarbone and worked upward. I knew that about her. I'd known it for 15 years. She was flushed. I said nothing. The third crack was the phone itself. She'd always been casual about her phone, leaving it on the counter, face up, not particularly precious about it. Around this same time period it was suddenly always face down. Always on silent. Always in her hand or in her pocket. I'd walk into a room and she'd pick it up off the table in one smooth motion, the way you do when it's become muscle memory. Fourth, she started being nicer to me. I know that sounds backwards. But there's a specific kind of extra attentive that a guilty person does. Little things, she'd refill my coffee without asking, she'd ask about my day with a focused quality she hadn't had in a while. It felt performed. Not mean, not fake exactly, more like she was managing something. Like she was maintaining a surface. I noticed, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Married men tell themselves that a lot. You don't want to be the guy who blows up his family because his wife joined a gym. Then I read those emails and I wasn't paranoid anymore. For 3 days after reading the emails, I went to work and came home and had dinner with my family and helped Tyler with a model he was building and watched TV with Lauren on the couch and said nothing. I needed to think. I needed to not react in a way that gave up the information before I knew what I was going to do with it. On the 4th day I called my brother Paul. He's a claims adjuster in Cleveland and the most methodical person I've ever known. I told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Before you do anything, you need to know everything. Not just what's in those emails. Everything." He was right. That same week I went to Best Buy and bought a small Blink indoor camera, the kind that looks like a smoke detector sensor, runs on batteries, no wiring required. Which I obviously knew how to install. I ordered a GPS tracker on Amazon, the Optimus 2.0 magnetic mount, real-time tracking through an app, battery lasts about 2 weeks. And I bought a Sony ICD UX570 voice recorder. Professional quality. I'd used one before on a job dispute with a contractor, knew how it worked. I was done guessing. I was going to know. The GPS went under Lauren's car that Saturday morning while she was making breakfast. Her Acura MDX dark blue 2021. The tracker is about the size of a deck of cards. There's a magnetic housing on the underside of the rear bumper channel, tucked up in the frame rail where it's invisible unless you're lying on the ground with a flashlight. I placed it in 11 seconds. I timed myself. The app Optimus GPS updated her location every 30 seconds. I could see it from my phone while I was on a job site, while I was eating lunch, while I was sitting on the couch next to her watching Netflix. Her little blue dot, moving through Columbus. The first week was mostly ordinary. School pickup, grocery runs, a doctor's appointment, the gym, which, I confirmed, she actually did go to. A few sales calls that matched the areas she'd told me she was working. Then Thursday came. She told me she had a client dinner. Regional team thing, she said. Probably run late. I said no problem, I'd handle the kids. I watched the blue dot leave our neighborhood at 6:47 p.m. It traveled north on I-71. It exited at Polaris Parkway. It moved through a residential area of Powell and stopped at 7:14 p.m. I knew the street. Not personally, but I'd looked it up the moment I found those emails. His name, the company directory, LinkedIn. His home address wasn't hard to find. People think they're invisible, but public records exist, and so does Google Maps Street View. The dot stayed there. It didn't move for 4 hours and 19 minutes. She got home at 11:40 p.m. I was in bed with the light off. She came in quietly. I heard her brush her teeth, change her clothes, get into bed. How was dinner? I asked. Long, she said. Team stuff. You know how it gets. Yeah, I said. I lay there and looked at the ceiling and listened to her breathing slow down into sleep. The voice recorder had been in her car since Tuesday. I'd put it under the driver's seat, tucked into the seat rail with a piece of Velcro. The ICD-UX 570 has a voice activation setting. It only records when there's sound. Saves the battery and the storage. Over the course of a week, it had captured maybe 9 hours of audio, phone calls on Bluetooth, mostly. Her singing along to the radio. A call with her mother. A call with a friend named Kristen about a vacation. And 3 calls with him. I listened to those calls sitting in my work van in a parking lot on a Tuesday lunch break with my AirPods in. The first call was logistical. What time, where, who had to leave by when. His voice was calm, pleasant even. I'd imagined someone I'd hate immediately. He sounded like a normal person. That was almost worse. The second call was after one of the Thursday nights. She sounded relaxed in a way I hadn't heard from her in a long time. Happy, actually. Genuinely happy. That one I had to stop and restart twice because I kept losing focus. The third call was the one that changed the stakes. She said, and I want to get this right because I've replayed it probably 40 times, she said, I've been thinking about what you said. About making a real move. I think I'm ready to have that conversation with him. I just need a little more time to set things up financially. He said, take the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She said, I just want to make sure I'm protected. The house is in both names, but the business account isn't. He doesn't really pay attention to it. I sat in that parking lot for a long time after that. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning her exit. And she was thinking about the money. I called my brother Paul again. He told me to call a lawyer before I did anything else. I called a family law attorney named Sandra Mercer that afternoon. Her office was on East Broad Street. She had 22 years of experience and a handshake that meant business. She listened to everything. Then she said, "The GPS data, the recordings, Ohio is a one-party consent state for audio. Everything you've recorded in a place where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy is admissible. Keep going. Document everything. Don't tip her off." I kept going. The Blink camera I'd installed was in the living room, technically, in the entryway area, aimed at the front door. It was disguised as a secondary sensor on the existing alarm system panel. Lauren had no idea it was a camera. I told her I was upgrading the alarm system, which was something I'd been saying I'd do for years, so it landed without suspicion. Over the next 2 weeks, the camera gave me the following. Tuesday, 3:18 p.m., Lauren came home. She was on the phone, his name, from the audio she said it twice. She sat in the entryway for 11 minutes before coming fully inside. She was smiling at her phone. The following Saturday, I told her I was going to Rick's to help him with a project. I drove around the block and watched the house from a parked position down the street. At 11:40 a.m. a gray Volkswagen Tiguan pulled up and parked in front of the house. I had his plate number from a public photo. I confirmed the plate. He sat in the car for 4 minutes. Then he got out and walked up to our front door. Our front door. He rang the bell. She answered. She was dressed up, not dramatically, but more than you'd dress for a Saturday at home. She stepped outside and they talked for a few minutes on the porch. They didn't touch, they knew to be careful. But there was a ease between them, a physical familiarity in the way they stood, that told me everything I needed to see. He left after 10 minutes. She went back inside. I drove to Rick's house and helped him install a light fixture. I didn't say a word about any of it. I ate the sandwich he offered me and talked about the Bengals and drove home. That night I sent Sandra Mercer everything. The GPS logs. The audio files. The camera footage. The screenshots of the email thread I'd photographed on my phone the morning I found it. Sandra called me the next day. Her voice had a different quality. More focused. "Dan," she said, "I need you to listen carefully. We have more than enough for the divorce. But there's something in these financial conversations that I want to look at more closely. Can you pull up your joint accounts, all of them, and send me 3 years of statements? I want to tell you about the Saturday it all came apart." Sandra had advised me to wait for one more Thursday. To capture one more documented instance of Lauren at his address via GPS, a third occurrence, she said, made the pattern undeniable in court. And she wanted the financial records reviewed before we moved. So I waited. I did one more week of dinner and bedtime routines and Saturday morning pancakes and all the normal architecture of a life that was hollow underneath. The Thursday came. Lauren said she had a dinner. I said fine. The Blue Dot traveled to Powell and stayed there from 7:09 p.m. to 11:31 p.m. The next morning Sandra called me. "I finished the financial review," she said. "Dan, in the last 18 months, Lauren has made 12 transfers from your joint savings account to a personal account in her name only. The total is $31,400. The transfers are small enough that they're below automatic flagging thresholds. I think that was intentional. She's been building a separate financial cushion." I sat in my van in my own driveway. "That's not just cheating," Sandra said. "That's financial fraud within a marriage." Combined with the recorded conversation about setting things up financially, we have a strong case that this was premeditated. This changes the asset division considerably. She told me she was ready to file. She told me we should serve Lauren the papers the following week. But before that happened, before lawyers and courts and formal proceedings, I needed to do one thing. I needed to tell my kids. Not everything. Not the details. But I needed to sit with Emma and Tyler before the world changed on them, and I needed to do it right. I want to talk about what happened 3 days before the papers were served, because that's the moment I think about when I need to remember why I went through all of this. Lauren had left for a Saturday morning appointment. She'd said she had a client meeting, which on a Saturday was not something I challenged anymore. The GPS showed her heading south on 71, away from Powell, toward downtown. Different location. I noted it but didn't follow. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter. Not her real phone, the regular iPhone she always had with her. This was a second phone. A Samsung Galaxy A series. The kind they sell prepaid at Walmart. It was in her coat pocket, the coat she'd worn Friday night and hung on the hook by the door. I found it because I was moving the coats to get Tyler's jacket and it fell out. I'm an electrician. I know about circuits, about systems, about how things connect. When I held that phone in my hand, I understood, completely and finally, that what I thought was a woman who made a mistake was actually a woman who had constructed a parallel life with deliberate architecture. The gym, the dinners, the burner phone, the savings transfers. None of it was impulsive. All of it was designed. The phone had a pin. I didn't try to get in. I photographed the outside of it, make, model, color, and put it back exactly where it had fallen from. That Monday I handed the photo to Sandra. She included it in the documentation. The papers were served the following Wednesday. I was at work when it happened. Sandra had a process server deliver them to Lauren at home in the mid-morning. I know because Lauren called me 47 seconds after being served. I didn't answer. She called 3 more times in 4 minutes. Then she sent a text, "Dan, we need to talk right now." I finished the panel upgrade I was working on. I made it clean, made it right, labeled every breaker. Rick asked if I was okay because he could tell something was off. I told him I was fine and handed him the torque wrench. I drove home at my normal time. Lauren was in the kitchen. She'd been crying, the kind of crying that leaves a physical mark, the puffy eyes and the tight jaw that comes after hours of it. She had the divorce papers on the kitchen table in front of her. She started to speak. I held up one hand. "Emma and Tyler are at your mother's," I said. I made sure of that. She stopped. "I know about the gym," I said. "I know about Powell. I know about the Thursday dinners. I know his name. I know his address. I know about the transfers from the savings account, all 12 of them, all $31,400. I kept my voice even. Flat and quiet, the way you talk on a job site when there's something serious and you need everyone to hear you. I know about the Samsung phone. And I have 14 months of documentation, GPS, audio, camera footage, email screenshots, and bank records sitting with my attorney. She didn't say anything. She sat very still. "I'm not here to have a conversation," I said. "I'm here so you know the position you're in before we go any further. My attorney will be in contact with yours." I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and drove to pick up my kids. That's the moment I think about. Not yelling. Not throwing anything. Just walking out with the information and letting it land. Here's the part one didn't expect. Sandra had sent the financial records to a forensic accountant as a standard step in the asset discovery process. Her name was Christine Fowler and she'd been doing matrimonial forensics for 19 years. Christine found the $31,400 in the personal account. We knew about that. But she kept pulling the thread. What she found, 3 weeks into her review, was that Lauren's income from Meridian Health Solutions had a secondary income stream that wasn't showing up in our tax returns. A consulting arrangement, technically payments routed through a separate LLC that Lauren had formed 18 months ago. The LLC was registered in Delaware. The name on the registration was Lauren's maiden name. In 18 months, the LLC had received $67,000 in payments from Meridian. None of it had been reported on our joint tax returns. Some of it had been transferred to the personal savings account. The rest, Christine traced it to a brokerage account, also in Lauren's name only, that held $39,000 in index funds. Total hidden assets, approximately $108,000. Plus the $31,400 in the personal savings account. Plus a 401k contribution rerouting she'd done through her company's HR portal that Sandra found during formal discovery. Sandra called this extraordinary financial concealment. She forwarded the findings to a contact at the IRS. That's not a threat or an exaggeration. Unreported income on joint tax returns is a federal matter. And the joint returns had both our signatures on them, which meant I could theoretically be held liable for taxes I didn't know we owed. Sandra moved to establish that immediately. The IRS opened an inquiry. And then, because this is how these things go when you start pulling threads, Christine found something else. 2 of the payments to the LLC had come not from Meridian Health Solutions directly but from a third-party vendor that supplied Meridian. A company called Pacific Rim Medical Distribution. Christine flagged it to Sandra. Sandra made some calls. Pacific Rim Medical Distribution was under a civil investigation by the Department of Justice for fraudulent billing to Medicare. They'd been overbilling for medical devices. They had a list of pharmaceutical sales reps who had received consulting payments in exchange for steering hospital procurement contracts their way. Lauren was on that list. I want to be clear, I didn't go looking for any of that. I hired a forensic accountant because my attorney told me to, and Christine Fowler did her job. What Lauren had built fell apart because it was built on things that don't hold. The divorce proceedings began in October. By the following January, the financial picture was fully documented. The asset division hearing took 3 sessions. Lauren's attorney tried to reframe the consulting income as a premarital separate property matter. Sandra dismantled that in about 40 minutes using the LLC registration date and the tax return signatures. The outcome on assets, the house went to me, in large part because Lauren's hidden financial activity was treated by the court as dissipation of marital assets. I kept the equity. She received a reduced share of the joint retirement accounts. The hidden brokerage account was folded into the marital estate. Lauren lost her job at Meridian in December, I found out through a mutual friend. The DOJ investigation was the primary factor. I don't know the details of what she was offered or what she agreed to. That's not my business anymore. The man from Powell, his name is irrelevant now, had also received consulting payments through a similar arrangement. They'd been doing this together. His employment situation resolved the same way Lauren's did. Emma took it hard at first. She's 13, she's smart, she understood more than I wanted her to. We did family therapy, a woman named Dr. Renata Harrison, out of Upper Arlington, who was calm and direct and didn't let any of us avoid anything. Emma started opening up around the 3rd session. By spring she was doing better. She made the volleyball travel team. She came to me one night and said, "Dad, I want you to know I think you handled it right." I told her I was just trying to be honest. Tyler handled it differently, went quieter for a while, spent more time in the garage. We started a woodworking project together, a bookcase, and we'd work on it on Saturday mornings without talking much, and that seemed to be what he needed. He finished it in April. It's in his room now. It's a good bookcase. Better joinery than I expected from a 10-year-old. Lauren moved into an apartment in Westerville. She and I communicate about the kids through a co-parenting app called Talking Parents, which logs every message and is exactly what you want when there's a trust deficit that size. She is their mother. That part doesn't change. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday. Not on purpose, it was just the court schedule. Sandra sent me a text when it was official. I was on a job in Bexley, replacing a 200-amp panel in a house built in 1962 that had been running on 60 amps and a prayer for 30 years. I read the text, put my phone in my pocket, and finished the job. Rick asked me to dinner. We went to a sports bar on Morse Road and ordered burgers and watched the first quarter of a Cavaliers game, and he didn't bring it up and I didn't bring it up, and that was the right call. I drove home. The house was quiet. Emma was at a sleepover. Tyler was spending the weekend with Lauren. I walked through the house, just walked through it, all the rooms, the kitchen, the living room, the garage. I looked at Tyler's bookcase. Still unfinished at that point, the sandalwood pale and clean. I stood in the backyard by the oak tree and looked up at the tire swing and thought about putting it down. I decided to leave it up for another season. I went inside and made a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen counter, the same counter where I'd found the laptop open 14 months before. I thought about the man I was when I sat down at that counter. How I'd felt the information arrive and closed the laptop and gone to work. Finished the coffee. Drove to the first job. I'd done that right. Not perfectly, but right. The following spring I took Emma and Tyler to the Outer Banks. The same house we'd rented for 6 years running, the owners knew us and gave us the same week. We ate at the same fish place, played the same mini golf course, walked the same stretch of beach at the same time of evening. Tyler found a piece of blue sea glass and put it in his pocket. He still has it. It's on his windowsill next to the bookcase. On the last night Emma and I sat on the porch after Tyler went to bed and watched the water, and she said, "Same time next year?" "Same time next year," I said. We sat there until it was fully dark. The ocean kept doing what it does. The lights on the water were steady and quiet. I was okay.